Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome back to another Tekken 8 video on the channel. In celebration of the inevitable release of T8 in just a few mere weeks. Seeing as we've covered Kazuya Mishima, it was only right that we cover the other pivotal half of Tekken 8's main narrative, the fallen Mishima and child of fate, Jin Kazama. Now Jin is a very important key character to the overall story and narrative of Tekken, having very big and ambitious shoes to fill from 3 onwards. One that to many could be near impossible to fill from his father. Yet Jin was not only able to do this, but become a literal rival to him as well as the rest of his family, becoming one of the iconic faces of the franchise. But how did this come to be? Well, let's break that down today. But as always everyone, quick reminder that if you like what we do here and wish to see more Tekken coverage on the channel, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as well as subscribe and tick that bell, as it's the best way to stay up to date with Tekken content going on here. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into things. Now Jin himself, unlike the rest of the Mishimas, didn't make his debut in the very first game. In fact, Jin himself didn't appear until the 3rd installment, following the death of his father in the prior tournament. Yet, despite his late arrival, his iconic look and fighting style really landed with Tekken fans, arguably filling up the spot that his father had left behind. Which begs the question, why is that so? Well, for us to truly understand Jin, as well as his rise to power, we gotta dial things pretty far back to understand his origin, his upbringing, as well as his family, as it will allow us to understand where he sits amongst his infamous bloodline. So let's begin. Now Jin is the son of Kazuya Mishima and Jin Kazama, veterans within the Tekken franchise and previous participants in the King of the Iron Fist tournament. Both descend from very prestigious bloodlines, with the Mishimas being a warrior dynasty, whilst the Kazamas came from a very extraordinary line that could tap into nature, spirituality, and even have the capability to suppress the devil gene. In fact, this is strongly believed to be the main reason Kazuya and Jin were attracted to each other. The nature of their relationship is never truly explored in game, but it's believed that Jin's attempts to cleanse Kazuya of the devil gene would actually lead to a romance between the two. One that did sadly end in failure, as its corruption had him too far gone, and if anything, knowing Kazuya simply added to his own ruthless nature. But in the dissolved relationship, Jin had been conceived, being a secret that only Jin would keep to herself, out of sight and out of gaze of the Mishimas. So in the aftermath of Tekken 2, with the end of Kazuya, the devil gene would sort out a new host. And what better spawn was there than the unborn Jin Kazama? Now, I do wish to elaborate and partially explain that the devil gene itself is something that is both genetic and supernatural in nature, having been passed down the Hachijo line from Kazumi to Kazuya and then Jin. There seems to be a pseudo-supernatural force associated with the devil gene itself, as it can possess someone and force them to give in to their darker urges. It is a biological parasite that is passed down by its bloodline. And when Jin was conceived, Kazuya's devil form had been split in 2, with one half remaining in Kazuya and the other in the unborn Jin. Fortunately for the unborn Kazama, the protective and magical nature of their line, as well as Jin herself, was able to fend off the devil gene's influence. So for the longest time, it did remain dormant in Jin growing up. With that said, very little is detailed about his home life with Jin, as the family dynamic there is never truly explored. But what we do know is that he had a deep love for his mother, as she fed him, raised him, and even taught him their Kazama style of karate. so he was completely unaware of his father, as well as the Mishima line. They lived in relative peace. But in time, this would all fall to ruin. 16 years would pass following the end of Kazuya's reign, and so a new villain would rise. One of mythological status, strength, and power, the Aztec warrior Ogre. Having been mistakenly awoken by the Mishima Zaibotsu, the god of fighting would be unleashed upon the world, seeking out worthy fighters to satiate its bloodlust. Their fighting spirits fed him, and so he would travel the globe, hunting and killing many for sport. And of course, it was only a matter of time before he found the Kazamas. So Jun, having sensed the evil approaching, finally decided to tell Jin the truth of his heritage, that he was of Mishima blood, and that should she disappear, to seek out his grandfather Heihachi for guidance. Understandably puzzled, Jin seeked out more questions, as there was just so much he didn't know. Yet, the only reply he got was an attack from Ogre, wreaking havoc on their home as neither of the two could best him. Before Jin could witness the climax of this battle, he would be rendered unconscious, only waking up in its aftermath with his home in ruins and his mother mysteriously gone. With Jun's disappearance, the devil could finally seek out the young Jin, branding him with a mark as a sign of ownership over the young man. Yet, from this point, it would bide its time, wanting Jin to tap into it out of desperation. In the aftermath of Ogre's attack, Jin would be forced to reach out to his grandfather, understandably astonished at the prospect of Kazuya having a child. Even so, he would still take him in, seeing the untapped primordial potential that brewed beneath his vengeance. However, this wasn't done out of the kindness of his heart. Knowing full well of the creature's hunger towards strong fighters, he had hoped that by teaching Jin Mishima-style karate, he could draw out Ogre during the next Iron Fist tournaments. So for the next 4 years, Jin would be put through hell with a brutal training regiment. Living in the Mishima estate also would enroll him to a new school, having him befriend a very young girl known as Xioayu. Whilst we barely see the two interact, it's very evident that Xioayu sees Jin as more than just a friend. Unfortunately, these feelings are not reciprocated, as after the attack, Jin had grown quite numb emotionally. In time, Jin would finally be seen as worthy in Heihachi's eyes, thus announcing the next King of Iron Fist tournament, taking us to Tekken 3. Here, Jin would finally be able to test his skill, holding his own exceptionally well, with his most notable match being against Hwoarang, as it did end in a draw. Even so, he would actually make it to the finals, and it unraveled in a way that no one could have seen coming, as Paul Phoenix, a world-renowned fighter, would also make it to the finals. But before Jin could arrive, he would encounter Ogre, actually defeating the behemoth in one-on-one combat. Sadly, his hastiness actually proves to be his undoing, as he would leave near immediately afterwards, not realizing that the tournament wasn't over, and that Ogre hadn't been completely defeated, having undergone a horrific malform change to its true form. By Paul leaving, this had actually given Jin the window of opportunity he had been looking for, finally able to see Ogre for what he was, not a god of fighting, but simply just a monster. It was a hard-fought battle, but eventually, the beast crumbles beneath his fists. And in a shocking twist of fate, before he can embrace his victory, he would be gunned down by the very man that had trained him, as the old man feared that his grandson could have also inherited the devil gene. And in a way, he was right to fear it, because in an ironic twist of fate, Heihachi had once again involuntarily activated someone's devil gene, causing Jin to rise in his new form and slam his grandfather into the ground, before then taking off into the night. So with Ogre's defeat, this now takes us on to our next game, Tekken 4. And the aftermath of the last installment is really felt in this game, as it takes a heavy toll on Jin's psyche, feeling both emotionally lost and betrayed. He would even relocate to Australia to get away as far as possible, training within a private dojo to unlearn the Mishima style of combat, as he felt poisoned by Heihachi's influence. But knowing all too well just how ruthless and resourceful his grandfather was, once the second King of Iron Fist tournament was announced, he would enter to end the Mishima line. Now, the details of who he canonically fought in this tournament can only be described as sketchy at best. But what we do know is that Jin would make it as far as the semi-finals, where he would actually be scheduled to fight his resurrected father. However, before this fight could commence, Jin would be ambushed and restrained by Heihachi, hoping to imprison both him and his father to the family dojo Honmaru. So Jin is completely absent for the finals of the tournament. That is, until he is awoken by Heihachi and his father, with Kazuya seeking to reunite his other devil half. But Jin would not allow this to happen without a fight. So the Kazama is able to shake off his shackles and battle his father, defeating both him and his grandfather as he prepares to take their lives. With his hand pulled back, he's ready to strike them down, until he has a brief moment of reflection and hesitation, as upon seeing his mother's face, he realizes that this isn't what she would have wanted for him, and so decides to spare the two as he flies off into the night. This then all ties into the opening segment of Tekken 5, as shortly following his departure, the temple would be attacked by G Corporation, leading to the complete and utter destruction of Honmaru, as well as apparently Heihachi. As its scorched foundation burned to rubble, Jin's great-grandfather, Jinpachi Mishima, would rise from its ashes, having been resurrected by an ancient angered spirit. His return directly impacted Jin, causing his devil gene to outright spasm and lash out as he annihilated a forest. Upon Jinpachi's rise to power, he would suffer horrific nightmares every single night. Knowing that it needed to stop, Jin would enter the 5th King of Iron Fist tournament to defeat his ancestor. And it was no easy task, as he would get a rematch against Hwoarang and actually lose in this bout. But before a victor can be determined, Jin's devil gene would surface, being squarely targeted at Hwoarang, who was near immediately defeated by him. It's a sad yet necessary evil for Jin, as he would be successful in laying Jinpachi to rest. But what occurs next, no one saw coming. As we move on to Tekken 6, Jin would now have full control of the Mishima Zaibatsu, and like his father before him, unleash pure chaos on the world, as he announced the company's independence and laid siege to the world, causing an international war to break out. But despite the nature of his family's desire for conquest, Jin had not actually provoked this war for the sake of his family's name. It was in order to unleash an ancient evil, because upon his grandfather's demise, Azazel, the progenitor of the devil gene, began to call out to him, casting a shadow over his mind and judgment, knowing full well that this could possibly lead to a downfall similar to that of Kazuya's. Jin believed that the only way to stop Azazel would be to create as much chaos as possible, so that from the world's ashes, the dragon could amass a physical form, one that he could defeat. He also believed that by destroying Azazel, it could very well eradicate the devil gene. Of course, in the public eye, this war would draw many eyes and many big names, as his biggest opposition in this war was G Corporation, now being led by Kazuya. In order to force out his son, he would actually have a bounty placed on his head, as it would lead to the creation of the next Iron Fist tournament. tournament. But it wouldn't solely just be Kazuya standing against him, as his half-uncle and rebellious Tekken Force leader, Lars Alexanderson, would wage his own war against him, with Lars being a formidable fighter, one that rivaled the best of the mishimas. Jin would keep a very close eye on him, having the Alyssa cyborg monitor his actions as a way to ward him off. Eventually, Jin is able to amass enough chaos to give Azazel shape, traveling to Egypt where he would meet Zafina. As he prepares for his final battle, he would be tracked down and attacked by Lars, being successful in defeating the apparent tyrant. Yet, this loss is very quickly brushed off, with Jin finally explaining to him the true nature of his plans. That he crippled tyrannical regimes and empires to rid the world of them, as well as Azazel and the Devil Gene, allowing it to prosper with no possible threats. He would eventually atone for his sins once Azazel arrived, fulfilling his destiny by plunging his fist into the dragon's chest, as both were swallowed by the abyss. Sadly, it would seem that his efforts would be in vain, as Kazuya's Devil Gene would continue to prosper in the following installment, Tekken 7. Whilst to the public and most of the world, Jin was believed to be dead, his body had in fact been recovered by the UN, seeking to punish him for his international war crimes. As he was being taken away in his weakened form and state, it would cause the Devil Gene to lash out, destroying the helicopter and sending him on a merciless journey across the desert. Eventually, he does wind up at a village, only to then be confronted by more soldiers. It's lucky that at this very moment, he would be saved by Lars Alexanderson, seeing Jin as their ticket in order to stop Heihachi and Kazuya. So Jin would be taken to Violet Industries, where he would recover from the events of Tekken 6. For the most part, he is largely absent from the main narrative of this game, as it is heavily focused on the Mishima line and the final battle between Kazuya and Heihachi, only ending with the old man's death. Thus, with him gone, Kazuya is able to return to power with no opposition, once again now setting his gaze on world conquest. But by the end of the story, Jin looks to have finally recovered from his wounds, now having full control of the Devil Gene. However, it's a massive question in itself if he is strong enough to take down his father. And like that, this has been it for the history of Jin Kazama. And this has been a really fun one to cover, as Jin himself is quite an interesting individual, having come in the second generation of fighters, where many faces have taken over the mantle of their predecessors. And for Jin, those were pretty big shoes for him to fill. Thus, it's always been very interesting to see how the three generations of mishimas could coexist. As, let's face it, we've already seen what they do to each other in the same room. With even all of that noted, this time things feel very different, as the death of Heihachi means that the stakes have never been higher. So the final battle between Jin and Kazuya looks to be one that will define the future of the Tekken series moving forward, with Fist meeting fate in this wonderful finale of the Mishima saga. So with that said everyone, that has been it for me. So as always, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting. I'll catch you in the next one.